Kathleen Long from Yelp. How are you?
Good. How are you? It still feels weird to hear that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So, where were you previously?
So RepairPal, and I still work for RepairPal.
Right.
And it's
But you
a
have a Yelp
wholly
address now.
yes, but it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Yelp, and so they'll be keeping the brand, especially for now.
Okay. How has that been for you? The transition.
Well, the transition, I'll tell you this, the transition is easier than the process of acquisition. So, we were literally working round the clock for the last couple months. And so
Mm.
by virtue of like comparison, the transition feels easy.
Right. Right. You're glad that other part's over.
Yes, absolutely.
How involved were you?
So I was very involved, and that's fortunate for me because I've been through an acquisition before, and I got brought in a little bit early on that acquisition, just to provide some, additional things that were needed or whatnot. But I've never ridden along from the very beginning. So for me as a professional, something that I wanted to do so I could learn. And so from that perspective, it was amazing. And I had to remind myself of that at moments where I was like, why?
Yeah.
Because, you've got, when it's a company as large as Yelp, acquiring a company the size of RepairPal, the thing is they have teams of like 30 people that do stuff that like one person does at RepairPal. So then trying
Yeah.
to generate, all of the documentation needed or answer all the questions or whatever, that's the hard part.
Yeah. It's all about perspective, you
Yeah.
know, like moving. It's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be worth it. This sucks, but one day we're
One
gonna
day.
look back and be thankful.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so this is pretty crazy. So you said for the past few months you were working on this. How long has it been in talks? How long has this been an idea? And then when did you announce it?
Yeah, so we actually went on the market just to kind of poke our heads around, see what was going on earlier this year. So like February, I think. Maybe
So
January.
you started it.
Yeah, we started a process and then we talked to Yelp among many others at that time. And then we got some feedback, we got some input. We decided to pull back from that strategy probably, mid-year.
Okay.
And then we were going to think about going back on the market in 2025. So we were done, we were moving on with life. We had these plans, we were implementing them. In a growth phase of the company, that sort of thing, and then they came back and were interested again. They had announced a strategy like mid-year, which they publicly announced, saying, we're going to acquire companies of particular sizes in areas that we have a strategic focus, one of those areas being automotive. And so they came back and said, we learned a lot about you earlier this year, but let's get more serious. And so we did a little bit of work around that. Ultimately, then you go into like a LOI, letter of intent phase. You go from LOI to signing. That took probably about a month and a half. And then the signing was public. So it got announced actually when we were at Apex. And then about 2.5 weeks later, we went from sign to close, which is actually, in M&A terms, that's extremely rapid.
Yeah.
Because we did have a staggered sign close. There were some conditions we needed to meet in order to do closing
Yeah.
after signing. One of which was something that I think is very important for any deal that we would have wanted to do as RepairPal, which was a certain percentage of our employees needed to sign and say, yeah, we're willing to go to work for Yelp. They didn't just
Right.
want the technology or whatever. They wanted the people, the sort of zeitgeist, the culture that is RepairPal. And I think that's important, not just for us, but for our, consumers, our partners, and the shops that are an important part of our platform.
Right. So you started the conversation. Yelp was interested, and then Yelp backed out, or you backed out, and then Yelp restarted.
Yeah, so neither one really. Like when you're acquiring interest from, a variety of different players, then you sort of, you're just like casting lines and having conversations. And we did
Yeah.
that with a variety of different companies. Ultimately, in that process, and this part's, confidential, so I can't say who, there was a company that was interested. And we had said, okay, like, let's try to move forward with them. But then ultimately, that deal ended up, not making sense. And so, both parties kind of walked away from that. And like I said, we had just sort of learned some lessons about, what it might take to be, have a higher valuation, the ways in which we wanted to grow the company. So we had some really good input. And ultimately we had some great advisors throughout this process. Both our legal team and our bankers were great advisors to us. And so we said, okay, like, let's just do this again in next year once we have
Right.
fulfilled some of our plans and things like that. So we kind of weren't ready. And we told Yelp that. We said, we were going to go out again next year. Like, this wasn't the timing that we preferred, this kind of thing. But they were really serious about it. Like I said, after getting that kind of probably strategic alignment internally with them about what their priorities were and what they wanted to do, and, getting their M&A budget together and all of that. And so, look, we're happy. I think they're probably, and I'm not privy to these plans in any way, but I think they're probably going to be more acquisitions by Yelp, in the coming months, year or so, as they fulfill that strategic, mandate that they put forward in, I think it was like a July press release that they talked about it. So I think that they will be having other acquisitions. I'm proud that we were the first. So when they looked out and they said, who do we want to acquire and in what area, they decided it was Automotive one and RepairPal one, which is kind of beautiful because they have, a priority in home services, health and beauty, some other areas, right? So it's not just about automotive. But Automotive was first and with RepairPal. So I'm excited about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, obviously, with any sort of big news like this, there's always speculation, there's always opinions, and that's a dangerous thing, when you try and figure out why things happen. So, that's why one of the reasons why I do this podcast to get the facts, tell them straight without opinions. So
Yeah.
from your perspective, tell me the whys. Why from Yelp's perspective? You've shared a little bit of that, but also why from RepairPal, and how did this make sense for both of you?
Yeah. So for RepairPal, I'll start with us because that's what I know best. For RepairPal, we've been doing what we've been doing with, limited staff and a limited number of resources. We've been funding our own growth for years now. So we were cash flow break even for a few years. And then we had just started to kind of turn a profit, not a gigantic one, but a profit nonetheless. And so, but it's very slow going when you're trying to build a three-sided marketplace with, fewer than 100 employees, right? So, and then, when you think about all of the time and energy it takes to manage, really large partnerships, as well as, approaching 4,000 shops on the platform, as well as, thinking about how you're going to build out your direct-to-consumer website and all of these things. So, our growth has always been limited, not by our ideas or our desire or our passion or any of that, but really literally by our resources.
Mm.
So we've known for a while that a likely outcome was a merger or acquisition of some kind for the company, and that we had hoped that when we did that, we would be acquired by a company who desired to keep our mission intact and to be able to just grow and scale the business. There's a lot of places we want to invest in from a technology perspective that we simply, have the idea, but not the resourcing to actually get it done. And so development has always moved slower than I and others at the company would like. So this accelerates that, and it allows us to, accomplish our goals with a wider scale set of, technology product resources in particular. And so I think, that part is going to be really helpful to us. And we would have looked for that as part of any acquisition that we were a part of, because we didn't build, devoted the last decade of my life to this. The CEO has been on board for almost 13 years himself. We didn't do that or devote this much of our lives to it to watch somebody kind of dismantle it or just take little pieces
Right.
of it. Or
You take
we
pride
want
in
to,
that.
yeah, we want to grow and
Yeah.
expand the mission. So that was our thought in going on the market. That was our thought in looking at companies that wanted to acquire us. Obviously, we wanted to get a reasonable price for the company given what we've built. And we wanted good outcomes for our employees because that's super important to us. We wanted to make sure that our partnerships and our shops would be valued and valuable to the acquirer. So we looked for things like that. For Yelp, they don't have a very strong reputation with shops in particular, but in the automotive industry in general. And they understand that. So they wanted somebody, who's closer to the shops. Our partnerships were also very interesting to them. Most of their business in this area is just direct to consumer or direct to shop. So shop pays to advertise on the platform. Yelp's got, millions of consumers that both come to the website and transact on the website every month. Those consumers come, they introduce them, and that's it. They don't have large scale partners in automotive that are saying, well, create a program specifically for me. So the fact that we're bringing partners like USAA and CarMax and all of the different partners that we have to the table was pretty interesting to them strategically. And look, they do understand the consumer because they have many millions more consumers on Yelp every month than we were able to get, as RepairPal. So we were pretty proud of our, 3 to 5 million consumers a month that we've done over the years. And that was big for us, but that's nothing like 74 million, right? So
Yeah.
at scale,
Yeah.
there's just many more consumers. And what I've said to our shops, because we do have an approach that's based on the shops being high quality. So it's not just any shop that can be part of
Right.
RepairPal. And so, what I say to our certified shops all the time is, I want to introduce to you every customer who needs an auto repair in the entire country because you deserve to have that introduction. And we're able to do that so much more easily, over time with these millions of consumers that are on Yelp. And having said that, figuring out how to take that traffic that's on Yelp and put it into a RepairPal like funnel over time so that it's not just any consumer, it's an educated consumer who understands it's quality repair, who understands that a quality repair costs a certain amount of money, this kind of stuff that we do today. That's going to really be the goal, is figuring out how to do that. It's not going to be the same experience. Yelp's got a kind of very basic request a quote process on their site. That doesn't really work that well for auto repair. We know that. We've integrated scheduling capabilities at this point. So many of our shops are doing real time scheduling, and we're continuing to build that out. We've got our own native scheduling system for other shops. We're trying to make those connections when we're introducing a consumer to a shop, as easy and streamlined as possible. So the shop doesn't have to go to a bunch of work or engage in some kind of bidding system or
Yeah.
something that's bad for the industry or that doesn't work. So we'll be introducing those concepts. And I think, having those capabilities and really understanding what it takes to get a consumer into an auto repair shop. We tend to bill on a pay for performance basis. So it's not on a click or on an impression or whatever. It's either per referral or per repair that we've been able to send to a shop, which is, a named customer, oftentimes who's spending money or transacting at a shop. And a shop's in charge of, which monetization method they want to use with the RepairPal, whether they want to pay per referral or pay per repair. That works out much better than paying for impressions or clicks. It's more friendly to the industry. It's more
Right.
based on actual performance and actual people spending dollars at shops. So I think all of that is important, as is, the concept of choice. Like, we don't force shops to participate in all our partnerships. They can choose which ones they do or don't want to, participate in, that kind of thing. So all of that stuff is going to be part of the learning that we've had over the years that we plan to sort of bring in the front door with us to start with.
It seems like a very mutually beneficial merger. Now, you said you're not going to release who that was, but the other buyer, would that have been a difficult decision between the two? Like, to me, it seems like Yelp is a no brainer, but would that have provided some hesitancy in the decision you wound up making?
Yeah, I mean, look, the best scenario you can be in as a company is if multiple people want to acquire your business.
Yeah, that's great.
Kind of go, what do we want to choose? And I think the other player was in more of a traditional player in the industry, and so the synergies were different. And likely some of the things that we would have worked on together would have been different. I think either outcome would have been good for our shops. Um, but it would have been a different culture, a different movement. I think Yelp is much more of a technology player. Ultimately, I'm excited by sort of what I call big tech, although in the space, with 5,000 ish employees, Yelp is actually medium sized. It just feels big to me because I'm coming from a company with fewer than 100 employees. But even so, having names, household names that people recognize, really
Yeah.
engaging in the auto repair space and devoting resources to understanding it. It's good for right to repair. It's good for the industry. More technology players need to be interested in playing, and not just the same folks that are already in the industry sort of cycling around and combining, which, look, that has its own value, because then you're saying, well, I'm meeting with somebody who, you know, or merging with somebody who really understands certain aspects of the industry already. There's a shortcut there that's really kind of beautiful, particularly for people like me, because then I spend less time, talking about that, more time doing what we're going to do together. Having said that, I don't think they were as technologically adept or forward. So some of the plans of like building, new experiences together, or really focusing on the consumer, which is what Yelp understands or brings to the table. This other company didn't have 74 million consumers a month coming, and that kind of thing. So, like I say, the synergies would have been different. Interesting still to me. I've met a lot of great folks as a result of this, process. That ultimately there were other companies we had exploratory conversations with that really didn't go anywhere as well. It gave me me personally, gave me a really unique view of the industry and some of the different players in it and what they're doing or thinking about as they think about their businesses. That was all extremely valuable to me. I feel like I'm a smarter person, maybe a little bit tireder as well, but definitely smarter person. And I think ultimately, now the task for me is to bring all of that to bear on um, what we're going to do next, and make sure I make good use of all those learnings. But yeah,
A-
ultimately I think this makes all the sense in the world, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Anything you want to share about those learnings?
Yeah, look, I mean, it is not the greatest market for M&A activity in general. But there are definitely a lot of companies out there that are thinking about like what's next. So, like, if you want to talk about, for example, shop management systems as a category, there's so many of them, right? Especially, and I've never been able to really make sense of that, because if you look at shops that do mid to major mechanical repairs, there's so few of them in comparison to how many systems there are. And when you think about shop groups, many of them have built their own proprietary systems. And so the marketplace seems pretty small, and there seems to be quite a lot of systems and things like that. So shop management systems absolutely are looking for ways of differentiating themselves in a crowded market, and saying, how do we rise to the top? How do we bring, other kinds of value, into the transaction? The same time, you've got parts suppliers looking to differentiate themselves. There's some news, unfortunately. Many of our friends at Advance no longer work there, and they've closed down their West Coast. We were looking strategically at, can we do more of an alignment with some of the parts providers and things like that, just in general, outside of M&A. But parts providers too are looking at ways of getting creative about the channels that they're able to push parts through. Like, might make some sense for somebody to partner with somebody like, RepairPal, because if you're able to drive, business and send that business through with a requirement that the parts get sourced through somebody as like a primary provider, for instance, that's a pretty interesting play for some folks to at least think about, or put on the table. So I think, based on the signals that I'm seeing, that regardless of what the market is doing, the interesting thing about automotive is it's been pretty recession proof. And I think, it's been there's still activity, there's signs of life going on in automotive as a marketplace, even thinking through like, okay, well, what is the additional value that we could provide? How do we combine with other companies or other players, whether that's, strategic partnerships or whether that's actual merger and acquisition activity to kind of come together and bring those things together. And then by the same token, there's a lot of um, just technologically we have challenges as an industry. I think this, but like part suppliers, for instance, maybe they have like 5 or 6 or 7 different channels for shops to purchase parts, and some of those are still shops calling over the phone or whatever. So how do they create
Yeah.
programs that are more digital without alienating their customer base? I think there's still a big challenge around that in automotive. For as sophisticated as the car is as a piece of equipment, our back offices in the automotive aftermarket are not nearly as streamlined or as well organized as many other industries are, which represents opportunities for players who are thinking about technology and what they want to do there and how to really make things easier or better for shops.
So you've got all this information, you've learned a lot, you've got new perspectives, you just got bought out, you're adjusting to that. In the future, with this purchase, Yelp and RepairPal, what are some ways that you're going to be able to tackle some of those issues and move the industry forward?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I think it's more important than ever for me to be out and about, as I like to say. So I go to a lot of different, industry events. I'm pretty active in the industry. And I think when a lot of times when people get busy, what they tend to do is just hunker down so that they can try to get everything done. And as a result, they get smaller. And I think the challenge for me is to make sure that I stay present. So my relationships are more important than ever. It's really more important than ever that I be active and vocal in the industry, that I've got an ear to the ground, that I'm listening to what's happening, so that I can take that back and integrate it. And, I've been the sort of face of RepairPal for a while. We've had other people who also filled that role over the years, but the last several years in particular. And I think, with the sort of responsibility of the face comes the voice, right? So, and I can only be the voice for others in the industry if I'm also listening, one mouth, 2 ears, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think that's going to be increasingly important so that I can bring that back and make sure that, Yelp gets the value of what they just acquired. And part of that value is for me to really stay plugged into what the industry needs and wants, and to make this acquisition super successful. Because then I think once it is, because I have confidence it will be, once it is, I think what happens is other technology companies start looking at automotive as an interesting place where they can either put their investment dollars, or where they can acquire or merge, or whatever those outcomes might be. And I think that's going to be really, really healthy for automotive. So I think as we all think about what we're doing next, financially and otherwise, really making sure that this industry stays vibrant, which is something that I'm committed to on a number of different fronts anyways. It's actually what I'm passionate about over and above sort of the day-to-day job that I do, is thinking about how this is a great industry for people to be in, and wanting it to be as diverse and inclusive as possible is super important to me. But as well as, thinking about that diversity beyond just individuals, but also thinking about how other industries can participate in automotive, which we already do when we assemble or build a car, right?
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
we think about the whole industry that way, then I think that gets a lot more interesting. And look, I'm just one person. I'm not going to do this by myself. But the great news is that, I have friends. I get opportunities like this. I get introduced to interesting people like you. And then hopefully, as we think about these, conversations and how these conversations can move the industry forward, all
Yeah.
together. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, we're
and
all on the same team. That's what I tell
yeah,
people, from shop management to shops, people within the shop, to coaching, to marketing, to RepairPal, to Yelp. I mean, we in some ways it's a competitive market, but for the most part, we're all on the same team here. There's a lot of cars out there that need to be repaired, and working together is so important. It just really is, and I think that's the best way to see improvement is to pick each other up, share advice, because you can't do it alone. Like you said, there's a lot of things that you want to see done, but you can't do it alone. So do what you can, and then find other people that are talented in other areas and share things that they can help you with, you know? So I think that's good that you have that perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's so important. And I just know there's so many things to learn or know about this industry. It's impossible to know everything,
right,
and it's impossible to talk to everyone. And so that's really where, if we stay connected, that's going to be the important part. You know, eh, and as I move throughout my day, because I do work with partners, I have the advantage of, I might talk to a shop first thing in the morning, and then I might talk to a large insurance company, and then I, might talk to somebody who works for a parts supplier or a shop management system or whatever. And then,
right.
I'm hearing common themes, but I'm also hearing unique challenges among
Yeah,
all of these, and then kind of bringing that together. That's part of my job, or at least just, hearing or understanding how we might fit in. Um, and that's how we're able to build partnerships, obviously, that benefit the business as well as is by thinking through those things. But a lot of people are starting to think beyond just the core confines of their job. So a lot of insurance companies are thinking about, and actually I recently did an interview about this, like, how can we use the massive quantities of data that we have to really improve lives for car owners and to make them safer on the road, which, oh, by the way, as an insurance company, reduces the amount of money that you have to spend on claims because your drivers are driving safer cars that have been repaired properly and all of these kind of
right.
things, right?
It all
So
works together. It
it
does. It's all
works together.
connected.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we've got this unbelievable amount of inflation going on, and the pressure for consumers around how to just afford their lives outside of auto repair. I mean, groceries are crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, how do we understand the reality too that our consumers have, and think through, solutions for them also?
So tell me what this Yelp buying repair pal means for the industry and how you see this affecting the industry in a way that shop owners and people inside will tangibly see and feel.
Yeah, so I think, RepairPal's been on a mission for a while, to highlight quality in auto repair, because there's still a lot of consumer mistrust. There's still a lack of understanding that consumers have around, what's a fair price to pay. Prices are on the increase. So it seems wild. I was just talking to someone in my family last night, and he's older and he hasn't had to have a water pump replaced in a while. And he went in to do it. And he was like,
Ooh.
oh my gosh, the last time I had a water pump replaced is like $400. And he
Yeah.
just paid 1,700 for it. And he
Yeah.
doesn't feel like he was ripped off. He was just astonished by the price and then not sure whether that was a good price or not or what. And so,
Yeah, yeah. And
actually,
that price honestly hasn't really increased until the past year or two. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it really has. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's go through it. Let's plug in your vehicle. Let's take a look. And oh, by the way, did they, replace your timing belt at the same time? And like, was there
Yep.
anything else that got done on the car? And, and so having that ability to educate consumers at scale is what I think the real opportunity here is. Because like I say, they're just
Okay.
people on the Yelp platform. So that's one thing. But
So
I
you want to
also
educate consumers.
yeah, and I think on the advocacy piece, so when we talk about, right to repair and having some of these, I think the larger opportunity, which I can't, commit to specific action at this point, but I think having the name, Kathleen at Repair Pal signing this little thing that says, yes, let's do right to repair, or whatever, is one thing, but Kathleen at Yelp and others at Yelp sort of participating in or thinking about the same thing, that's something different altogether, right? So I
Yeah.
think the opportunity is, for other, large scale public companies to sort of join the fray, and to help, so that consumers really do have choice. Ultimately, Yelp's mission is connecting consumers with the best local businesses, which obviously spans well beyond auto repair. But if we think about that and how compatible that is with what RepairPal has been doing over the years, specifically in auto repair, and then we think about how compatible that is with the mission on, right to repair and having consumers have choice as to where they take their vehicles and making sure that the information that is needed in order to repair those vehicles is shared through the industry and things like that. I think there's a large part that we can all play in that. And those additional resources don't hurt one bit.
Yeah. So, a lot of people use RepairPal. There's a lot of people that enjoy their experience and some that don't. That's with everything. What kind of changes do you think this means? And you may not really know a lot about this yet. I'm sure you're in the process of learning these things, but what kind of changes do you think happen to RepairPal for the users that haven't had the best experience? What kind of deals are you working on now to change how that operates? I don't even know the right question to ask. You fill me in on what, because I'm sure you're looking at the data and you're working with customers and all that kind of stuff. So what does this mean, and what kind of things do we expect to change?
Yeah, so RepairPal has always been a three-sided marketplace. So when we say users or customers, right? Like there's different customers that we have depending on what side of the equation you're looking at. So our focus and our is always the consumer. We want the consumer to have a good repair experience. And so, in that sense, if we have a dissatisfied consumer, and we're going to, because
Yeah.
A, nobody's perfect, B, sometimes consumers just don't understand what's going on, or they have out and out, not great intentions with their auto repair experience in the first place, or they're not able to be satisfied. There's all kinds of reasons why a consumer might or might not be happy with using the service. And then, we've got a partner layer. And so, a consumer may or may not be happy with a partner. So, for example, what if that partner is a third party payer? And so they don't agree with what got covered or what didn't get covered for their specific repair, or whatever. So we do our best to create winning outcomes for consumers as much as that's possible. And we and our shops have pretty high satisfaction scores around that. And we have a satisfaction guarantee that we execute on. But having said that, it's never going to be 100%. So I think, again, at scale, the opportunity there is for us to scale some of the ways in which we do that, which is very personal today. And I think will continue to be personal, but I think there's ways we can expand. For example, Q&A section on our website where we're, answering consumers' information. We can expand the data that we use to equip consumers with answers to symptoms they might be seeing on their car, problems they might be having, et cetera. So I think that's one set of opportunities that we definitely have. On the shop side, which is probably more ear to the ground what you're hearing about,
Yes.
we definitely have shops that are satisfied and not satisfied. So shops are either customers or partners of RepairPal, depending on how you look at it. And with that, we've had a record year of growth with signing shops to our network and to our platform. And there's been some downward pressure on the shops as well. So some of our partner referral relationships, some of our large ones, are ones where a lot of the repairs are paid for by a third party payer. Because of the inflation that we already chatted about in auto repair, what you're seeing is that those third party payers are getting upside down on the stuff that they're paying for. So the consumer buys an extended warranty at a particular price point, and then auto repair shoots up by 24%, as we saw in the first 18 months post pandemic. Then a lot of times those third party payers are upside down, and they start to think about how can we cost control, and how can we, still offer the consumer a completed repair at a certain level of quality, but also, not be upside down on every single one of these policies, because then it doesn't make sense for them, or it gets harder. By the same token, you're going to see more consumers pursuing these extended warranties in these plans, because the reality is auto repair, as well as many other consumer services and goods and products and everything, in this inflationary period have increased beyond the consumer's ability to afford it all.
Yeah.
And I think, not to get political, and I won't, I promise. But this is what happened in this last election is
Yeah.
that people
Absolutely.
were really reacting to, my gosh, like somebody please stop this inflation and please stop the bleeding and whatever. And a lot of people took it as a commentary on people's social values, which I don't think it is. I don't really think it is. I think it's just people looking at their lives and not being able to afford it. And I have a unique perspective on that, sitting where I sit and talking to as many consumers as I do, and seeing what's going on is that there's just, people are just getting squeezed. Maybe they have a job, maybe they're even making more in their job than they ever did, but yet they're, economically day to day poorer than they used to be because
Right.
everything they have to pay for to afford their life is more expensive.
Yep.
And that's tough moment to be in. And it's a tough moment for an industry where it's already expensive. Nobody enjoys getting their car repaired. They're like, oh, yay, my car broke down. No matter how much you like your mechanic and, talking to your person there, that's not going to be something that you enjoy. So, having to pay for. So I think there's all of that kind of pressure. And that has made, quite frankly, like RepairPal less popular because as we work
Mm.
with partners, then we're working to execute on those cost control measures that some of our partners want us to put in place. And that puts a squeeze on shops from what they're able to charge versus what they want to charge or what they might charge retail.
Right.
And so I think, the goal is, as always, is to diversify partnerships so that there's a variety of different sources of traffic that are coming in for shops and that some of those have cost constraints associated with them, which may or may not work for some shops and some don't. And so, being in a larger environment and having a Yelp name doesn't hurt anything from a BD perspective. It
Yeah.
increases the reach of our company and our ability to sit down, at the table with large names, which look, I'm proud of the companies that we've acquired and the names we've acquired as little old Repair Pal, right? But it doesn't hurt to, to have the Yelp name and to think about, how that expands our ability to bring partners, to negotiate with partners, and to try to strike deals that work for shops. And also, like I said, to attract some more of that, Yelp volume and to have more of a quality network focus at Yelp versus just more of an advertising or listing focus, to have that quality focus, to be able to bring that in and think about, how do we acquire some of that additional, customer pay traffic into shops. I think that's really going to be great for shops. Ultimately, we are a business and we do charge for the referrals that we make to shops. And so some shops are going to like that and some aren't. We have work to also create different monetization models, which might, some shops still prefer, obviously most of our shops still prefer to pay per repair because that's guaranteed value. But if a shop would rather pay per referral, we're now offering that. We're improving scheduling. I hope to improve some of the other tools that we use to more easily and flexibly connect consumers to shops, because ultimately, like, if we can make it drop dead easy for the shop, that's the goal. And we're still working on doing that, bringing that educated repeat customer back to
Yeah.
shops. But I expect that there's always going to be noise in that, and it's going to work for some shops and not others, and all of that. And I think the critical thing for us is that we've always had a quality, focus and emphasis, and that we continue to have that moving forward, and making our certification program more robust so that shops that are participating with us can continue to feel good about it. And then ultimately, the programs still have to meet whatever the partners' goals are in order for us to continue to attract partners and stuff. And so really, I and my team sit in the middle of that triangle, right? And we've got to make it work or win for all three sides of the triangle. Otherwise, it doesn't. Um,
Right.
we're a month to month service. So if shops don't love it, then they'll cancel. And so I think, grumblingly or not, many shops admit that we bring them significant value. So while they don't love all the cost constraints and things like that, they're finding a way to work with them and to continue to get the volume that we do bring, which is, undeniable that we've improved the growth trajectory at a lot of shops by, bringing that volume in.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, there's always opinions and speculation and people that share stuff that is not fact or confirmed. It's just their opinions on stuff. And so I think this is really good for people to hear from you, your perspective on the acquisition, your goals for the future, even what you think the economy is doing to everything. I think this is really good for shop owners, even consumers, to hear from you about why this is important to the industry and why it matters. And you didn't really give it step-by-step tips, but you kind of gave shop owners tips on best practices to use RepairPal in the future. Because I just got off the phone with a RepairPal user before you and I talked here, and he loves RepairPal. He says it makes him a good chunk of change every year. But he was like, so many people in the industry don't use it effectively, and so they have a negative view of RepairPal. And he was like, they just don't know how to use it. And so I think you've kind of helped with some of that too, understanding just how to do that. So thanks. I guess that's the best way to
Yeah.
put it, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, look, we'd be happy to work with shops who want to optimize or who want to learn from, other shops that, are really making the most of RepairPal. We'd be happy to do that. We have a lot of content that we've built over the years and that we'll continue doing, a lot of education for shops. And it isn't one of those things where you just turn it on, walk away, and don't think about it. There is a
Right.
process to it. And so you do have to engage with it. Now we're trying to make it easier and easier, of course. But it's still like anything, you get into it, what you put into it, you get out of it, what you put into it. I think I said that right.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Well, thanks for chatting with me, Kathleen. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been great.
Hey, if you're still here, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Automotive Repair News Today. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment, like, share, subscribe to the podcast. That'll help us out a big deal and help grow the show. And you know what? While you're at it, slap on a review too if you feel like this content is helpful for the industry. Don't forget to follow us on all your favorite social media platforms. We're on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Stay connected and be the first to know about new episodes, behind-the-scene content, and more. And until next time, let's make the industry better together.